Introduction. There are several remedies derived, proved, and established from Aconite family, the most important of which is Aconitum napellus. Aconite is one of the deadliest and most rapidly acting poison, yet, through Hahnemann's discoveries, it has been transformed into one of the best of the nurseries. It is one of Clark's A, B, C nurseries, others being belladonna and chamomilla. Aconite causes turmoil in circulation, belladonna causes turmoil in brain, and chamomilla causes turmoil in temperament. Had it not been for the wonderful curative power which Master Hahnemann found and developed from this wild poisonous plant, we would have been lagging behind and missed a lot in the effective treatment of many acute diseases in their initial stage. Aconite is a short and quick-acting superficial remedy for acute and most distressing conditions. Aconite is like a great storm, it comes suddenly and violently, sweeps over, and passes away in the same manner. With the action of the remedy, the storm is over. And in this powerful drug, we find a ready solution to many of our staring problems encountered when dealing with many diseases, provided they are in the initial stage and the symptoms corroborate. Clinical. In the initial stage of any acute diseases such as apoplexy, asthma, chest affection, chickenpox, cholera, convulsion, epilepsy, croup, cough, diarrhea, dropsy, dysentery, amenorrhoea, dysmenorrhea, bad effects of fear and fright, fever, headache, heart affections, inflammation, menses, pneumonia, suppression of urine, vertigo, etc. Spheres of action. Perhaps there may not be any organ, tissue, or system in the body which is not susceptible to the action of this remedy. Still it predominantly acts on cerebrospinal nervous system, brain, serous and mucous membrane, blood, cardiovascular system, etc. Pathogenesis. Aconite causes turmoil in circulation. It is capable of irritating brain and cerebrospinal nervous system, producing exalted activity on the circulation, paralysing the capillaries, resulting in tension and congestion with tendency towards inflammation. The genius of this highly useful remedy is through mental sphere, and it is always important to consider the mental symptoms. Its action on heart retards the intensity of its function. Constitution. Physical makeup. Since aconite is purely an acute drug, consideration of constitution is not of much importance. However, it is indicated in acute cases occurring in plethoric sanguine persons with rigid fibers, dark hair, and eyes, full of plethoric habits, who lead a sedentary life and who are most in need of aconite are strong, robust people. Aconite is the remedy of the rosy, chubby, and plethoric babies. Temperament, sanguine temperament. Relation with heat and coid, no definite stamping can be made in this respect. Still, aconite seems to be a warm-blooded patient. Miasm, Sera is the miasm in the background. Guiding symptoms. 1. Tension is the keynote of aconite, keynote of belladonna is congestion. Due to irritation of the mind and affection of circulation, tension always prevails in aconite patients. 2. Aconite is indicated in the first stage of any acute case which starts suddenly and violently like a storm. 3. It is one of the trios of restlessness, others being arsenic and rust ox. The patient is very much restless, cannot remain in one place. He is full of energy, vigor, and strength, as such, moves frequently from place to place. Aconite patient moves quite frequently because physically he is very strong and he can move about, but in arsenic the patient is too weak to move although he wants. 4. There is great fear and anxiety of mind, intense nervousness. The very face of aconite expresses fear, and this remedy is curative of ailments from fright, mental or physical. The patient tosses about in agony, life is rendered miserable by fear. 5. Fear and fright are the most characteristic manifestations of aconite. Fear of death even predicts the time of death. In arsenic patients too, there is fear of death. He feels that the disease is fatal and he is surely going to die. But the difference is that arsenic patient does not predict the time of death and he feels that the disease is incurable and fatal. Therefore, there is no use of taking any medicine, hence no doctor is to be called. The aconite patient thinks that unless proper medicine is taken, he is going to die and, therefore, wants the doctor to be called immediately. 6. Dry and hot skin with rare sweat, Nash. Where there is sweat it is only on the parts rested upon Baeric. 7. According to Nash, aconite is one of the greatest pain remedies. His trios of pain remedies are aconite, chamomilla and coffea. Aconite screams with pain, pains are intolerable, they drive him crazy, he becomes very restless at night. The pain is often associated with numbness, platina, chamomilla. 8. Excessive sensitiveness to the least touch. 9. Unquenchable thirst for large quantity of cold water. 10. There is active hemorrhage from any part of the body, both internal and external, uterus or other places in stout plethoric patients. The character of the blood is pure, and bright red accompanied by fear of death and nervous excitability. 11. The face of aconite patient is red or red and pale alternately. Anxious and frightened expression. Sensation of face growing or swelling. On rising, the red face becomes deathly pale and he feels dizzy. 12. Aggravation, in the evening and especially at night. Amelioration, by uncovering and in the open air. 13. Aconite is the drug for the congestive stage of inflammation before localization takes place. 14. Paralysis from exposure to dry cold wind, cost. 15. Mind. Aconite patients have peculiar mental symptoms which are as follows. There is great fear and anxiety of mind, with great nervous excitability, which run through the whole drug. The very face of aconite patient expresses the fear. The aconite patient has fear of death, in any acute disease, fear of darkness, fear of bed, fear of ghost, fear of going out. Fear to go into a crowd where there is any excitement or many people. Fear to cross street, fear to cross a bridge. Fear of death in pregnancy. There are numerous remedies having fear of death, but the peculiarity of aconite is clairvoyance, i.e. the patient predicts the date and even the hour of death. If a clock is in the patient's room, he will say that when the hands reach a particular point, he will be nothing but a corpse. This symptom is very striking and peculiar to aconite only. It is the aconite patient who calls his friends around him and takes leave of them. Such a mental state occurring in the course of any illness calls for aconite only. The patient seems to have been threatened with sudden, violent death, but recovery is also very quick like a great storm, only to be quiet very soon. The patient is very much restless and he does everything in great haste, must change position quite often, everything startles him. The aconite patient tosses about in agony and his life is rendered miserable. Music is unbearable for aconite patient, it makes her sad, Sabina. Thuja, graphites, natrum sulf, natrum carb. This mental anxiety, worry and fear accompany most of the trivial ailments. Almost certainly this remedy should never be given in case where the sickness is borne with patience and calmness. Mental calmness contraindicates aconite. If aconite is to be thought of, there must be mental uneasiness, worry, anxiety and fear accompanying the most trifling ailments. Intense and uncontrollable anguish, anxiety, and great fear, are characteristic symptoms. Hahnemann says, whenever aconite is chosen homeopathically, you must, above all, observe the moral symptoms and be careful that it closely resembles them, the anguish of mind and body, the restlessness, the disquiet not to be allayed. 16 ailments from exposure to dry cold air, dry north or west wind, or exposure to draught of cold air, while in perspiration, bad effects. Of checked perspiration, fear, fright, shock, heat of sun, excitement, injury, surgical operation, etc. Headache. Causation: exposure to dry cold air, exposure to draught of cold air, while in perspiration, bad effects of checked perspiration, fear, fright, shock, heat of sun, excitement, etc. Location: intense pain is felt in the frontal region or semilaterally. Sensation: headache as if nailed up, drives him crazy, fullness and heaviness in forehead, as if the skull would be forced out through the forehead. Burning headache as if the brain were agitated by boiling water. Sensation of fullness and throbbing in the head. Modalities: aggravation, towards the evening and at night, when going to bed. Pains are worse in a warm room and when lying on affected side. Amelioration, in the open air. Concomitants: fear of death, anxiety, worry, mental uneasiness and restlessness. Cough. Causation: cough may be caused due to exposure to dry cold air, dry north or west wind, or exposure to draught of cold air, checked perspiration, etc. The cough may come along with fever or cough itself may start violently. Character of cough: it is sudden and violent. It may be croupy in nature. Cough is dry, bars, suffocating, loud, rough, croaking, hard, ringing and whistling. Modalities: aggravation, on expiration, towards evening and at night. Amelioration, in the open air. Dysentery. Causation: fear, fright. Excitement. Mode of onset: sudden and violent. Shock, heat of sun or character of stool: there is sudden agonizing pain in the abdomen. Severe tenesmus and gripping colicky pain. Frequent stool: stool contains undigested food particles, mucus, and bright red blood, frequent desire to defecate. Modalities: attack severe and more towards evening and at night. Concomitants: there is intense nervous restlessness, fear, anxiety, and anguish. The patient tosses about in agony. He thinks the attack is fatal and he is going to die. Collapse. Causation: just as in dysentery, cholera may also set in due to fear, fright, shock, heat of sun, or any excitement. Aconite Napellus. Mode of onset: the onset is sudden and violent. Character: there is severe vomiting and purging of profuse quantity. Gripping and cutting pain in abdomen. Frequent desire for stool and vomiting. Modalities: aggravation, towards evening and at night. Amelioration in open air. Concomitants: there is severe precordial pain, intense nervous restlessness, fear, anxiety, and anguish. The patient tosses about in agony. He thinks the attack is fatal and he is going to die soon. Convulsion. Generally teething children may get the attack of convulsion which will be relieved by aconite. Character of convulsion: there is jerking and twitching of single muscle, agaricus, zincum met. The child gnaws its fist, bites, frets and screams. The skin may be very hot and dry, with high fever and dilated pupils. Menses. There may be amenorrhoe or suppression of menses in young plethoric girls, usually after fright, fear, or exposure to cold, etc. Fever. Aconite is a great fever remedy. Causation: exposure to dry cold air, dry north or west wind, or exposure to draft of cold air, while in perspiration, bad effects of checked perspiration, fear, fright, shock, heat of sun and excitement. Mode of onset: starts very suddenly and violently. Symptoms of fever: there is sudden and violent attack of fever with high rise of temperature. Severe chill in the beginning, violent and more chill in the evening and at night. Very chilly if uncovered, but with internal heat. The acute fever is generally of short and sharp attack. There is no periodicity whatsoever. The most violent attack of fever, requiring aconite, will subside in a night. No other drug is needed. Aconite should never be given simply to control the fever, never be alternated with other drug for that purpose. Face during fever: face is red or pale and red alternately. Anxious and frightened expression. Sensation of face growing or swelling. On rising, the red face becomes deathly pale and he feels dizzy. Skin during fever: skin is dry and hot with burning sensation. Skin is red, shining, hot with violent pain. Sweat in fever: there is drenching sweat, especially on parts laid on, which relieves, boric, natrum mur, serinum. Thirst during fever: especially during the heat state, the patient is very much thirsty. There is burning thirst for large quantity of cold water. Mental symptoms during fever: the patient is very much anxious. There is intense nervousness and restlessness. He tosses about in agony. The face is expressive of fear, fear of death, and even predicts the time of death. Becomes intolerable towards the evening and on going to bed. The patient thinks that he will definitely die soon, and the fever is so severe that it will be fatal to him unless treated immediately. Modalities: aggravation, towards the evening and at night and in a warm room. Amelioration, in open air and by perspiration. General modalities: aggravation, evening and at night, pains are unsupportable, in a warm room, when rising from bed, lying on painful or affected side. Amelioration, in open air. Relations: aconite is complementary to coffea in fever, sleeplessness and intolerance of pain, to arnica in traumatism, to sulfur in all cases. Rarely indicated in fevers which bring out eruptions. Aconite is the acute of sulfur, and both precede and follow in acute inflammatory conditions. In aphonia, when acon, phos, spongia fail, china should be thought of. Antidotes: bell, cham, coffea, nux v, sepia, spongia, sulf. Antidote by acid, alcohol.